You are not going to believe this one, so let everyone settle down and have a coffee, or maybe something stronger. Comment and let me know from where you are seeing this tale, since it is evidence that reality can be much, far stranger, and really more idiotic than fiction. An explosion so strong it shook your teeth, and caused you to believe a jet had crashed close by woke you at 5 in the morning. Well, I have. Furthermore, the offenders are, let's just say, before breakfast. The HOA police next door most likely set a new world record for the fastest shift from self-described lawmen to genuine prisoners. The worst part is that they had no knowledge the county sheriff herself was asleep in my guest room, just 50 yards from where they intended to engage in demolition derby, with my ranch gate, using what looked disturbingly like a homemade bomb. Oh, the fantastic irony. Now, this is a long story, a strange story, but stay with me since the finish is pure gold. The Barm Ranch has been owned in my family over 5 generations. We are speaking well over a century of blood, sweat, and tears spilled into this country tucked against the Blackwood Mountains. This is heritage, not only property. Legacy. Mostly we keep to ourselves. We tend cattle, raise hay, and here life follows the seasons, the demands of the cattle, and the consistent rhythm of hard effort. It was quiet, perfect. Until roughly 10 years ago, when the luxury estate of Whispering Pines began to grow like an invading fungus on our eastern boundary. Not a working agricultural scene. Our tranquil part of the county was suddenly overrun by people who seemed to have bought into a Disney movie. Their homes were large, consistently beige, packed closer together than sardines in a tin, each with a carefully maintained grass probably requiring more water than my whole herd. Of course, they also brought with them a homeowners association, the evil of many property owners' life. The grievances began rather predictably. The mooing of cattle at ungodly hours like dawn, the smell of manure, which I personally associate with honest work and a healthy ecosystem, and my own favorite, an official grievance about the visual pollution of my 50-year-old tractor, which I sometimes parked near the fence line we shared. At first, I attempted to be neighbors. Attended several of their HOA meetings in an attempt to demonstrate that a ranch is in good condition. We have been here long before Whispering Pines was even a glimmer in the imagination of a developer. A man called Arthur Abernathy, the self-appointed king of Whispering Pines and HOA president, greeted my statements with blank glances or, worse, condescending little smiles. Among those men whose feeling of self-importance appeared to collapse with every word was Abernathy. Pastel polo shirts a size too small, a brilliant belly, and a dazzling black Escalade he most likely polished more than he told his own wife. He had a way of gazing down his nose at you even if you were taller, which I am. Our property seemed to him as a sad rustic blot on his ideal suburban tapestry. Once unironically referring to his territory as the Riviera of the Rockies, he gave me all I needed to know about his attitude toward reality. We were only the ugly service door to his dream world. The little irritations becoming more severe. Notes regarding weeds, which were actually native wildflowers, put on our fence posts call for moving a watering basin since their rustic appearance ran counter to community norms. Mostly ignoring them, I filed their progressively passive-aggressive then downright violent letters in a growing folder marked, Abernathy's Follies. He seemed to me to be mostly hot air, a little dictator in a small pond. I undervalued his fantasy, and the extent he would go to claim imagined power. Then Abernathy, in his great wisdom, decided Whispering Pines required its own private security force. Not just a drowsy guard in a booth but tactical gear-wearing wannabe commandos roaming their cul-de-sacs in golf carts, decked out to appear like small police cars. For being excessively aggressive, he hired 2 specimens that seemed to have been turned away from every real police enforcement agency, and numerous amateur paintball leagues. We called them Rambo and Terminator right away. This is where the narrative truly spirals, my friends. These were not only neighborhood watch volunteers. Abernathy persuaded them, including himself, that they belonged in a constabulary. Their main objective is my ranch. Then Abernathy wasn't going to stop at highly worded letters. I should have known. His ego was a runaway train, and my ranch gate stood just on the tracks. The quiet before the storm was fading, and the first gusts of an absolutely dumb hurricane were beginning to blow. Chief Security Officer Jenkins and Deputy Officer Miller marked a new era of ridiculousness, Rambo and Terminator preferred or otherwise. Jenkins, Rambo, was a portly fellow, whose tactical vest looked like it was holding on for dear life, constantly angry red face, mirrored sunglasses worn indoors, utility belt loaded with gear, oversized flashlight, handcuffs, taser he clearly longed to use, and novelty oversized sheriff's badge clanking when he walked. Miller, Terminator, was towering, unnervingly quiet, staring dead-eyedly that made one wonder whether he was figuring out the best approach to disable you. With holy zeal, they began guarding Whispering Pines as though they were in a combat zone. Their initial visits to my property were cautious. They would park their tactical golf cart just on their side of the fence and stare, occasionally noting. Once, Rambo hollered across a cheap megaphone one of my cows was loitering with intent, close to the fence line. Bessie the cow simply nibbled her cud and showed no interest. I beginning to feel like Bessie. But simple observation didn't satisfy Abernathy's power trip. The references started to flow. Printed on Whispering Pines letterhead, official-looking documentation including unauthorized agricultural odors, excessive bovine vocalizations during quiet hours, and my favorite, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony for a patch of apparently perfect healthy alfalfa that apparently offended their delicate suburban sensibilities. These references obviously lacked legal weight. Their HOA excluded my ranch, and we were not subject to their ludicrous restrictions. I was aware of this, and I believe they were also. Abernathy, though, was a master bluster player. People would just fold, he thought, if he behaved as though he had power. With me, he was going to be surprised. I copied every citation for my Abernathy follies, then carefully utilized the original to fire the burn barrel. Still, I became really concerned about paperwork. Put high-definition security cameras all around the edge. Instructed my ranch hands on phone recording of any interactions with Rambo and Terminator. I even spoke with old college friend Ben Carter, a property law specialist lawyer. Ben listened to the story, laughing and disbelieving alternately. Legally, he explained, they cannot touch you, but individuals like him use nasty strategies to make life miserable. Keep all of it documented. Each letter, each meeting, each ridiculous reference. We want a paper trail so thick it would suffocate a donkey, should they ever attempt anything foolish. Prophetic words. On my territory, the first frontal clash was not long off. Lights flashing, yes, real flashing lights, were seen while I was inspecting a fence line on my ATV when their golf cart bounced over the minor rise defining the unofficial boundary. They stopped me by pulling up. Rambo staggered out, his hand resting on his taser. Puffed, voice striving for power but mostly sounding winded. Sir, this is a restricted access area. Says who? I cut the engine of my ATV and inquired. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association Security Department, said Terminator's flat voice from the passenger side. I had to back off laughing. Fellas, I answered coolly. This is the Barmem Ranch. Since your grandpa was still in diapers, the Barmem Ranch has been home. You are violating someone else's property. Point that exalted golf cart back the way you came before I call the real sheriff. The face of Rambo grew redder. Official HOA business is being done here. Mr. Abernathy let us guard this border area to guarantee adherence to community covenants. With a bluster. Your community covenants end at that fence line, Rambo, I exclaimed, pointing with my thumb. And right about now my tolerance is running out. Get off my land. For a second, I worried Rambo would really try something. His fingers clenched on his taser, but Terminator only stared. Then their tactical illusions were shattered by either common sense or a reflex of self-preservation. They grumbled something about reporting and turned away grudgingly. Abernathy's ego was obviously damaged by that brief interaction, as a week later, the official threatening letter arrived. It was from a law firm I had never heard of, probably some cut-rate company Abernathy discovered online. And it was a masterwork of unfounded allegations and inflated language. The essence is my main ranch gate, the large, robust one bearing the bar mark burned into the upper arch, was an illegal intrusion on an intended historic Whispering Pines access easement. Oh, and that also went against their supposed aesthetic guideline. The letter asked the gate to be taken down right away within 7 days, or they would take all required measures to clear the path and bill me for every penny. Pure fantasy. There was not such an easement. My property deeds were ironclad, and its aesthetic code covered roughly the same area above my gate as it did over the moon. Ben Carter, my attorney, responded politely, but clearly referencing pertinent deed records and property laws. He essentially advised Abernathy and his lawyer chasing an ambulance to go pound sand. We sent it certified mail and asked for a return ticket. Abernathy signed for it personally. I could see his face turning that wonderful purple hue he preferred when rebuffed. The 7-day deadline vanished from view. The gate stayed just the same. I thought that would mark the end of it. Surely, even Abernathy wasn't dumb enough to try to physically take my barrier down. Oh, my mistake was quite bad. Abernathy's notion of all necessary actions was far more literal, and far more crazy, than I could have dreamed. He was going to turn this suburban dispute into a news item. An uncomfortable silence descended over the fence line the week Abernathy got Ben's stern response. Still visible, Rambo and Terminator were running their patrols in their pretentious golf cart, but they kept their distance, mostly simply glaring from far away. That kind of silence comes before a thunderstorm, weighty and powerful. I started looking more regularly at the treeline, a tingle of discomfort slithering up my neck. My old friend Sheriff Jim Thompson contacted during this critical period. Jim and I have stayed in touch over the years, and we go rather far back. High school football friends. He was a decent man, sturdy, no nonsense, and committed to his work, which in a large rural county like ours usually involved more community connections and handling of lost cattle than intense crime. "Hey there, you old cattle rustler." His familiar voice exploded across the phone. "Coming up is a lengthy weekend. Thought I may suggest you to visit the ranch using that deal. My wife advises me to relax, and looking at your ugly mug for a few days seems less taxing than another town council meeting." I chuckled. "Besides ugly mug, Jim, the guest room is always ready for you. Come along. If you're feeling bold, we can go fishing down by the creek, perhaps even calling in a coyote or two. Sure as short is peace and quiet." I had no idea how ironic that promise of peace and quiet would be. Arriving on Friday afternoon, Jim looked exhausted, but delighted to be off his uniform, and into jeans and a flannel shirt. Drinking iced tea and watching the sunset color the mountains orange and purple, we stayed on the patio late evening. I filled him up on the continuing story with Whispering Pines, Abernathy, and his explosive team of mall ninjas. Jim listened carefully, nodding sometimes and producing a low whistle. "A burgeony, what a character," he said, whirling the ice in his glass. "Yeah, I have had a few interactions with him, mostly traffic complaints and missing poodles. The man most certainly views his own importance highly. Private security armed with tactical equipment? Sounds as though he is acting as mayor of his own small country. He was empathetic, but unless real laws were broken on my land, he was only able to provide broad guidance. Just keep documenting everything, he said, repeating Ben's advice. If you give them enough of that, people like that usually hang themselves with their own rope. I didn't know at the time Abernathy was getting ready to hand them a blasting cap, along with a whole shipment container's worth of rope. Saturday turned out to be unremarkable. Tranquil, even. Jim and I fixed a section of fence. He was rather helpful for a desk jockey sheriff, and then Jim and I lounged by the creek for a few languid hours. The silence was appreciated, even though the fish were not biting. The only minor issue came from young Billy, one of my ranch hands, saying that Rambo and Terminator had stopped their golf cart exactly opposite my main gate for about an hour, just observing. Billy claimed that Rambo had binoculars on. Although not obviously illegal, it was disturbing. Jim responded, "They're trying to scare you," when I told him. Classic bully tactic. Put them aside. Give them the response they desire none. That evening, seated to a steak supper, I felt a sense of foreboding that would not go away. It was a minor annoyance akin to the air pressure declining before a major storm. I brought up this with Jim. Though he seemed contemplative. "Probably just Abernathy getting under your skin," he remarked. "Still, it pays to stay alert." We changed in really early times. Jim had the guest room front of the house, with a view of the driveway and main gate, roughly 100 yards down the gravel road. As I went off to sleep I thought, At least with the sheriff on hand, Abernathy's men would definitely have the sense of low lying. That, my friends, was maybe my most important mistake throughout this entire affair. Underestimating the infinite ignorance of men with a grievance and a lost sense of power is a deadly game. Just before dawn the next morning, that folly was going to erupt deafeningly. Jim still wore PJ bottoms and a t-shirt, but his eyes were wide open and clear. What the devil was that? He snarled, his voice all sheriff. There is no friendly fishing buddy. No idea, I said, walking toward the front door. The sound seemed to emanate from the front gate. We sprang onto the porch, flashlights slicing across the black night. The air smelled strongly of smoke and something else. Something chemical and harsh, like discarded fireworks but far stronger. My main gate should have been in the distance, but all I could see there was a flickering orange glow, and a disorganized twisted metal shape. Jim yelled, already headed for his county-issued truck parked next to my pickup. Stay here, might not be safe. He went for something from the passenger side. Still, I was not about to stay put. This was my ranch. Adrenaline dominated caution. I ran to get to my truck and reached beneath the seat the heavy-duty mag light I kept. Our headlights lit an absolutely devastated scene as we approached the end of the driveway. Gone was my lovely, strong Barm M gate, the one bearing the family brand that had stood for decades. A mangled jumble of wood and steel, shattered poles, and a crater on the gravel road resembling a tiny meteor replaced it. Two individuals stood beside the rubble, silhouetted against the flickering flames of some still-burning timbers. Their absurd tactical outfits were clear even in the low, turbulent light. Rambo and Terminator, Jenkins and Miller. They simply stood there, Rambo clutching something resembling a remote detonator, both looking arrogant, unbelievably, shockingly nasty. Then Jim Thompson, still in his jammies but now with his service weapon drawn and badge clipped to his t-shirt, entered the glare of my headlights. The county sheriff. Do not move. Hands where I could clearly see them. He yelled. His voice exuded the clear weight of authority that no bravado from Abernathy could ever match. The change in Rambo and Terminator was almost funny and quick. Their arrogant looks disappeared, then slack-jawed incredulity took place, like two coyotes who had captured a rabbit only to discover it was a grizzly bear in disguise. Rambo dropped the detonator, as though it were suddenly scorching hot. He hesitated, voice several octaves over his normal pseudo-authoritative baritone. Sheriff, what are you doing here? Terminator just halted, eyes wide, showing for once something other than blank indifference, pure panic. Jim shot back, advancing carefully, firearm steady. I'm wondering what you two are doing blowing up private property at 5 a.m. with an improvised explosive device. This is an official HOA action. Desperate to recover any piece of his perceived power, Rambo shouted out. Mr. Abernathy told us to take down this illegal gate. It's an impediment. Jim did not blink at all. Mr. Abernathy lacks the power to sanction the use of explosives, let alone order a ham sandwich outside of his own kitchen. About half a dozen more felonies I could think of on the way to the station. Malicious destruction of property, illegal use of an explosive device, reckless endangerment. You two are under arrest for. Around you turn. In front of your backs, hands. Currently. One of the most pleasing sounds I have ever heard came from the click of handcuffs ratchets closing. Jim recited their Miranda rights, and Rambo kept chattering as he listened. We cannot be arrested by you. We are officials of the Department of Whispering Pines Security. This is an interpretation gone wrong. Jim only stared at him, his face one of tired contempt. Son, he continued squarely. Right now you're two idiots in cheap tactical gear who just committed a very serious felony on my watch. You will also discover that playing cops and robbers in your golf cart is far more entertaining than actual jail. Just starting to slink over the mountains, the sun created a golden glow on the scene of their total self-inflicted devastation. I thought of it as a very lovely dawn. Jim's deputies arrived right away. Surreal against the backdrop of my flaming gate and two confused HOA officials seated shackled on Jim's truck. Flashing blue and red lights cut across the dawn mist. At last Rambo had shut down. His face resembled a pale, doughy mask of horror. Silence was all that Terminal said. But his typical apathetic look was replaced by one implying he was mentally revisiting every poor mistake he had taken to bring him to this point. Professional and quick, the deputies secured the site, taped off the area around the crater, and snapped pictures. From the county seat, the bomb squad was dispatched to investigate the wreckage and remaining device. Far more strong and hazardous than even I had first thought, it turned out to be a sizable quantity of illegally obtained commercial-grade blasting agent, only loosely linked to a remote detonator. These morons may have killed someone. If we had been any closer, they could have killed either Jim or me, or if the shrapnel had flown differently. The smug pleasure I experienced upon their imprisonment now mixed with icy resentment at their reckless ignorance. Once the initial anarchy stopped and Rambo and Terminator were carried away in separate patrol cars, still objecting to their official HOA duty to any deputy who would listen, Jim turned to me. Though he appeared worn out, his jaw set in a grimace. He replied, running a hand through his already untidy hair. "Well, so much for a quiet weekend." He gave me a shoulder tap. "You all right?" Still a little stunned, I nodded. "Indeed. Simply considering the absolute stupidity of everything. They really blew up my gate." Jim groaned. "Yes, they did. They will also be paying for it now. And so is your friend Abernathy, if he is as involved as these two clowns already seem to be." Apparently, Rambo had begun singing like a canary under a spotlight, trying to blame the entire concept on Abernathy, once firmly ensconced in the rear of a cruiser, and realized the weight of his situation. Like his namesake, Terminator stayed mainly silent. But on its own, the evidence at the scene, including the detonator Rambo dropped, was quite incriminating. After the bomb squad cleared the area and I made my official statement later that morning, 2 deputies visited Whispering Pines luxury homes, more especially, the residence of Mr. Arthur Abernathy. Of course I missed there, but Jim later told me about it. All told, it was an amazing show. Presumably awakened by the far-off boom and wondering whether his troops had fulfilled their objective, Abernathy was in his silk pajamas and monogrammed robe when the deputies arrived. At first, he tried to bluff, claiming HOA presidential authority, and even threatening to summon his presumably fictitious strong buddies. Still, the deputies lacked Rambo and Terminator. Equipped with a warrant and real power, they were real law enforcement. Abernathy's calm apparently fell like a day-old croissant when shown the preliminary remarks from his arrested security commanders, and the proof of a felony plan to commit destruction of property with an explosive device. His face changed from a disgusted puce to a ghastly, white color. He was detained and driven from his beige mansion in handcuffs. Like the shock and surprise his immaculately groomed neighbors were just starting for their morning power walks and gluten-free muffin runs. Finally, the self-appointed monarch of Whispering Pines was deposed. Dethroned before he had imported coffee. A man whose ego most likely had its own zip code. The legal aftermath was, as my attorney Ben Carter brilliantly described, a symphony of justice for us and a lovely train catastrophe for them. Charges against Rambo Jenkins and Terminator Miller included raft of felonies: possession and use of an unlawful explosive device, conspiracy, aggravated destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. They swiftly turned and gave thorough testimony about Abernathy's explicit instructions to remove the gate by any means necessary, including how he helped them acquire the special fireworks that turned out to be commercial-grade blasting agents, most likely via some dubious online contact. They were facing major prison time. Abernathy discovered he was facing comparable accusations, even though he hired an apparently costly attorney. His attempts to present himself as a worried community leader, misled by overly ambitious staff members, collapsed against the pile of data and the damaging testimony of his former subordinates. The trials for criminals were quick. Having cooperated, Jenkins and Miller were sentenced less, but still spent several years in state prison. A long cry from patrolling cul-de-sacs in their tactical golf carts. The genius, Abernathy, received a longer time. The judge, a straightforward woman obviously devoid of tolerance for vigilante HOAs, set an example of him. Most likely, his escalade was taken back before he completed his first prison meal. In civil terms, Ben Carter had a great time. We filed lawsuits personally against Abernathy, Jenkins, Miller, and the Whispering Pines HOA as a group. There was enough proof to overwhelm me. Unquestionably evidence of terrible carelessness and illegal activities directed by their president. The insurance company of the HOA settled rather rapidly, for a very large sum. That settlement paid for a brand new, even more spectacular gate made of custom-forged steel, this time with a reinforced concrete base. Let them attempt it once more. Included compensation were all legal bills, emotional suffering, and damages. More importantly, the lawsuit and criminal charges rocked Whispering Pines. The HOA board broke under dishonesty. The buddies of Abernathy were sacked. Terrified by what had happened and anxious to atone, a fresh, far more rational group of neighbors seized control. The Whispering Pines Security Department was sacked right away and permanently. Their golf cart is said to have sold for components. The new HOA leadership even came to me, apologized sincerely, and we developed an unexpectedly friendly relationship. They also asked for my opinion on smart landscaping along our common boundary, without asking to have century-old oak trees taken down. Rebuilding the barn gate, larger and more robust than before, I made it abundantly evident that we were nowhere. Though he joked that his wife now believes my ranch is a high-risk combat zone, Sheriff Jim Thompson gratefully finally found his calm weekend. The whole process was a masterclass in how unbridled ego and a small need for control may produce shockingly self-destructive results. Abernathy believed he was a king running over his small domain. He was simply a bully with a polo shirt and an unfounded entitlement. Rambo, Terminator, and Rambo discovered the hard way that honoring real law differs greatly from playing at authority. And they discovered that occasionally, the peaceful rancher next door might simply have the county sheriff asleep in his guest room. You only never know. What then is the most outlandish HOA tale you have ever heard? Comment on it by dropping it here. I'll see you on the next wild journey. Thank you for staying with me through this one.